So's my camera. There we go. All right, creatives, community, kind folks out there, and I have to include classmates and collegiates. This is RPG with DBJ. Sorry about poking the finger into your faces if you're watching this live. Uh, uh, due to holiday, today is actually going to be Third Pillar Thursday, as opposed to Future Friday. Now I understand today is really Friday, but I'm moving each day one day forward with my psychic abilities to alter time and space, and also just to make sure that we still get our third pillar in, we still get our Future Friday, and the fact that I probably stayed up almost 24 hours the other day because of the holiday here in the States. Now, for those who don't know, I am still live here on YouTube, generally Monday through Friday. Of course, we just skipped a day because of the holiday, and we also have voice chat capabilities available to us at Fantasy Grounds College Discord. So if you wish to listen in, or you have a better connection through audio, please tune in that way. And this week we were talking about the Underdark, subterranean adventures and such. And of course, we talked about it on Monster Monday, and we went through a Discord Tuesday into Fantasy Grounds College. Of course, we will try to do this Monday through Friday. And World Building Wednesday, we even talked about some things. But we really want to. This is kind of my passion project kind of thing, just basically exploring the idea of the third pillar. Now, for those who don't know, the third pillar of tabletop RPGs is exploration. The first and second pillar being combat and social interaction. And then I take it even further with the idea of exploration in terms of using it as that third tool, that third element in your game. So it's not just a matter of having a sword fight with a blind lizard man down in the Underdark, but it's doing it on the shores of a vast underground lake, or at the top surfaces of crumbling ground near a massive waterfall, or being trapped inside of a cave where you have to squeeze through it, and it's only yourself and someone else, and their enemies are pouring down at you from above, throwing rocks on top of your head, and all these other kind of things where you're using the environment itself, and that becomes a dynamic portion of the environment. And one of the best things about using the environment, either in combat while your PCs are engaged with their adversaries, or separately in terms of them overcoming an obstacle. The best thing about it is, for the most part, you can't hit it with a sword. You can't hack at it with an axe, or rather you could, but that may not solve the problem, right? Sure, someone can break a door down or hack away at some debris, but for the most part, you cannot do battle with a rainstorm or flood or earthquake or massive snowstorm or blizzard or frozen lake. And those are the kind of things that I think really, and as Pelor says in the chat, like, die lava, die, swing. Yeah, it looks like that it doesn't work. So sometimes you have to think out, not just outside the box, but just be creative in dealing with the situation. Of course, it means that those of us that are DMs and GMs in the game must allow our players to freely express the way that they solve these situations, and basically be their fans, and just be happy when they come up with these really crazy, wild ideas to overcome these situations. And of course, the environment, you can't run out of it. So be willing to use and abuse the environment. Okay, so that's the preamble. So now let's get into let's get into the exploration of the Underdark and subterranean. Rickard says, this is why we personified the elements. You don't go trying to kill the thunderstorm. You seek out Thor or Zeus and ask him to be quiet. And how much so do we do that as humanity, and even in our like ancient cultures and stuff, because we want to have that control, or at least feel we have that control, and that somehow we could beseech the elements to have mercy or control them or trick them or um, uh, you know d- a desire to address ourselves to their better halves. Hey, my family is drowning, or our crops are are drying out from a drought. Could you please send rain, and that kind of thing, or beseeching the I don't know, the winter storm gods to make sure that your family doesn't, you know, um, doesn't die out in the frozen wastes and such. And that may be a very huge element in the Underdark, and especially in terms of incorporating elementals and uh, jinn and Ifrit type creatures, sentient elemental creatures down in the Underdark. If you want to include uh, otherworldly creatures, maybe in your setting, they are not otherworldly. They just happen to come from deep in the ground. Maybe they're fiends, demons, devils, and those kind of things that just live in instead of the core, instead of our scientific reason for having the core of the planet, the core of your planet might be the hells and the abyss and such. And there may be reasons for some of these cultures existing because they've beseeched the elemental princes or what have you to have them survive, maybe in exchange for service or sacrifices or missions, or heck, even drawing random adventurers down into the Underdark. But one, unfortunately, something that we don't give a lot of attention to is the fact that down in the Underdark and down in the subterranean realms, it's any creature that has the ability to move and flow and travel through the earth has an extreme advantage. Ignoring the fact that the PCs may be in areas that are undeveloped, and so they have to climb and squeeze over and under and in between rocky elements that might be unstable. You do have creatures that have the tunneling ability. Now, I completely understand why Dungeons and Dragons and other games don't have extensive rules for creatures that tunnel and how you interact with them, because it could get a little complicated depending on how deep in the woods you take your rulings. But it would make a lot of sense that a creature that can tunnel, let's take your average average, I'm going to say, giant worm or insect or something that can burrow through the ground, or even dire versions, giant size versions of things like moles or groundhogs or something. And the first of all, unlike swimming through water, which has its own problems, the earth itself is protecting them, would act as cover in a certain in to a certain extent. And the rules as presented essentially allows them to swim through the earth. And so uh, for your specific table, you'd have to not necessarily homebrew, but everyone should agree as to how much cover, if any, do some of these creatures have based on their depth or their activity or inactivity when inside of the ground. So PCs are walking through a cave, they've got their lanterns out, their magic light or something, they hear something rumbling, and suddenly a giant worm or tentacle creature or beetles or something burrows from above and tries to grab them and snatch them into the up into the earth, away from their fellow adventurers. Can someone follow them? Should they be able to follow them? Could the PCs follow a giant worm as it travels back to its haven or something and follow it down a tunnel? That's going to be based on the rules and rulings you have in your own game. Could there be a monstrous digging machine, maybe reskinned as a instead of a purple worm, maybe you've just reskinned this purple worm as a gnomish digging machine? And does it leave a perfectly circular tunnel behind it, or is it designed so that the soft earth collapses behind it, and the PCs, if they try to follow it, must follow at a fast pace or something. All these things are options. Definitely something you want to write some notes down about, and how you interact with them. Now, naturally speaking, we do have ourselves, you're a horrible situation for any PCs that you put them in is the idea of being stuck in a tight space. And being stuck in any kind of tight space for any reason, I think, is one of those things um, that causes panic on many levels for anybody. Uh, I can say for myself in my own house, I have a crawl space, and I don't particularly like to be down there at all. So the fact that someone's dressed in armor and laden with equipment and packed with weapons and all those kind of things down in a place where you're going to confront lots of enemies. The idea that you're going to have to squeeze one at a time, belly crawl to get to a possibly larger cave opening, to go down a vertical chasm that maybe extends, I don't know, 5 times, a person's height above you, but still squeezing through the narrow pass is very difficult to get through. So you may have to go through not just one at a time, but also being caught into a tight space as well, which there are absolute rules for being in a tight space in Dungeons and Dragons as well. I believe you get like disadvantage on your attack rolls and your dexterity saving throws, and your enemies have an advantage on their attack rolls to hit you and such. And that may be a very tough and possibly lethal decision that your players have to make to fit through this crevice in the ground, moving through it one at a time or whatnot. And then, of course, there's always the dangers, even with the light or abilities like dark vision, that the PCs may have to enter into an area and not know how far that area presents a danger. For example, if the PCs have to belly crawl and remove all their equipment and take their armor off to squeeze through a tight opening, and they can only see 60 feet in front of them, and it's still this tight opening, who's to say that they aren't going to confront a dead end, or a blackened area that might be a drop off, or disturb something that could cause a cave in which case they wouldn't be able to move. And that brings us to other things in subterranean areas as well. It's not just earth in the earth, right? We can come up with so many other things. For example, if we are very close to the surface of the world, there are lots of things happening on the surface that can impact the subterranean realm, such as maybe there are deep-rooted trees that the PCs have to navigate around, or torrential rains, or traveling in the ground underneath a waterfall could cause soft ground to turn to mud, or maybe the PCs are underground underneath a desert area, and there's lots of sand pouring in, almost like a natural hourglass effect, pouring into an open chamber, but there's sand pouring from above. There could even be ice and any number of things, out of control foliage that's growing down underneath the ground, especially if they're closer to the surface. As they go deeper, of course, we brought this up before about aquifers. Aquifers are trapped pockets of water, and a trapped pocket of water could be anything like pools of water or a lake, subterranean lake, all the way to something that's completely encapsulated or enclosed, and could be something set up that's under pressure. So the PCs may feel a wall and understand that there's moisture behind the wall, and maybe the dwarf in the group realizes that there's 100 million tons of or gallons of water behind this thing, and break the wall. It floods the cavern, and we might not want to cause any harm there. Although there could be cultures that have set up those traps are classic kobolds, I don't know, gnomes or dwarves or other communities that understand those hazards exist in the Underdark and then use those things for their own benefits. For example, there may be we have ourselves traps, right? Maybe you're a DM and you're like, man, I haven't used a trap in a long time. We can reskin those traps as natural things in the environment and things placed there purposefully or a combination of the two. For example, there may be a cavern with tall pillars in the cavern, and the PCs have to slip and slide and turn between these pillars and plateaus down in this cavern, and high above, 60 feet or 100 feet on top of these pillars or these plateaus, there may be boulders balanced precariously on top of them on purpose, so that if the dwarven hold is invaded by enemies, they can just call out a horn, and maybe there are individuals up there who, just slam their hammer into a single iron spike that causes an avalanche, or the rocks to fall, or nets to fall on top of the PCs, or the classic Indiana Jones running away from the giant boulder coming down the path. That may be a thing as well. So we could still add in traps in the games. I think sometimes the resistance to adding traps is like, why would they be there? And how dynamic is a trap anyway? Either someone sees the trap and just completely avoids it, and then as DMs, we feel a little bit disheartened by it, like, oh, well, they made their perception check, they saw the trap, big deal. Or the PCs get caught in the trap, and then the PCs feel like there was a got you, while you as a DM are happy. The PCs are like, well, whatever, we got caught in the trap, big, yeah, you got happy, but then we got stuck. And so, yeah, Pelora goes on to say traps are okay if they're not just a gotcha for the GM. I absolutely agree. If there's context for a trap, and you really allow the players to use and abuse them, and not just be a gotcha for the GM, I think traps are an excellent thing that you can add to it. And again, context is important. If the PCs know they're on a mission to go into an ancient dwarven hold, and the whole point of the adventure is that the dwarf is protected by the 12, I don't know, the 12 obstacles or something to get this ancient treasure, and no one's been able to find it, and that's the whole point of the adventure. Sure, the PCs find this out and they realize it. Sure. Traps used to protect a community makes perfect sense. People, we ourselves make traps to protect our belongings in the history of our world, and so those traps could, of course, be take the volume, turn them up to 11, throw them in your game, and it makes perfect sense as well. Plur says, I don't have a pit trap in my living room, or do I? Exactly. But and of course, there's the idea of having too many traps, or traps that don't belong. It doesn't make much sense to have like 5 different types of traps before entering into a community if that community has to navigate their own 5 traps to get in and out, right? So you could add in an element of traps having a need to be activated or turned on, or somehow during a time, let's say a community during peace, of course they don't have their traps activated, but if they know that there are invaders or spies, or they hear the rumble, the telltale rumble of some sort of danger, then they may activate those traps. And again, allowing the PCs to circumvent those needs. Maybe they are sneaky enough to get around the community before the traps are activated, or maybe once the traps are activated, they're able to convince the trap operators that they should pass by without being hindered. For example, your classic castle with a portcullis technically is a trap, right? PCs go up to castle. There is a lowered gate, or maybe even a raised gate, or a drawbridge, and which technically is another trap. And then, of course, convincing the officials whether you should or should not pass. Maybe you can get trapped between portcullis, um, going into a castle. And of course, down in a subterranean realm, the same thing could happen. Whether it's, you know, PCs go into a cave and then enemies drop a boulder in front and behind them, sealing them inside the cave. Maybe in addition, they go into a room and, um, dwarven. I'm using dwarves a lot in this particular conversation, but the dwarven defenders use their portcullises, portcullises, portcullises. Um, hey, if it, yeah, maybe they use an iron spike to break open the wall to allow a portion of the underground lake to flood part of their chambers or something. Yeah, we're just going to call them gates. Exactly. Pillar-ist activated machines work for me. I'll steal that if it comes up. Also means the PCs can use them if they get around it without alerting the guards. Right. And see, that's the other thing about traps, right? You don't need to necessarily create them to be set and forget. If the PCs slip past a collapsing wall trap, they could then use that same knowledge to maybe lead their enemies back towards the same area and then collapse the wall on top of their enemies, which my thing is go for it, right? That's definitely absolutely do that and go for it. Let the PCs use and abuse the environment. You're not going to run out of it. Now, there's some other hazards, and i.e. we could reskin them as traps or creatures or spell-like effects, which are things like, again, the aquatic nature of being underground, the poisonous gases, acids, oozes. You don't necessarily have to have an aquifer or liquid environment filled with water. It could be filled with acids, poisons, sentient or non-sentient oozes and things. And again, we have spells and spell-like effects that we can use. We can play with all of our like puddings and jellies and gelatins and those kind of things. Yeah, Rickard says, you're not going to run out of it. Tell that to Goku, the company who likes to use world-destroying attacks. Yeah, well, yeah, if you're going to Haruken your way out of your way through an adventure, I suppose you're going to have to come up with new worlds or something every time they destroy another mountain range. Yeah, well, Pillar-ist is always more worlds. That's funny, but yeah, you guys could really. I mean, I think just playing with the idea of, heck, like instead of a grease spell, it could be oil or like natural oil, or instead of an entangling spell, it could be tar. Instead of, I'm trying to think of some other liquids like of course we have lava, we've got ice flows, or even frigid waters. We can have so many things and use those to really change your subterranean realm environments. So it's not just a matter of, okay, you're walking through caves. Okay, for the next 3 hours, you walk through some more caves. Oh, it's been 3 weeks. Okay, you walk through some more caves. Instead, I would suggest making them kind of setting up different types of environments inside of your subterranean realm, whether it's tight areas or basically forests of stalagmites and stalactites, whether there are areas filled with like soft sand and almost like underground sand dunes, or a place where it looks like the ceiling has dropped geometrically sized chunks of earth from the ceiling or whatnot. We talk about those crystal caverns. There's plenty of geode, giant-sized geode-styled caverns that the PCs can travel through, and of course, we can't forget our air and water elements into this, as well as fire. So, as far as air, there can be strong winds, or even if you want to go so far as to create atmospheric elements in the underworld. So not just high winds, but maybe even things very powerful tornado winds, fog, mists, obscuring, gases, sleep gases, poison gases, gases that will paralyze or could be extremely flammable, which which creates its own problems if they're around like poisonous methane style gases, it, whether scientifically real or fantasy imagined in your world. The PC that wants to, they're the pyromancer of the group, the storm cleric of the group might the PCs might want to like say, hey, all right, hold on, guys, please don't summon that lightning bolt because you're going to kill the rest of us. But yeah, what are some other things? Oh, when it comes to lava and fire, that becomes its own problems. Now, yes, you could come up with situations where fire could actually be sucking the oxygen out of an area. There could even be even a cavern with a flaming, I guess, tornado or firestorm happening in a room where literally it's being fueled by the oxygen in the rest of the caves and such, and the flames could be reaching up so far as the surface. The PCs could even be under or next to, on the surface world, we consider a geyser, but the PCs are down below, and there could be some kind of timed or randomized or chaotic pressure that flows from beneath or around the PCs, forcing them straight up through a type of a tower or a well that might force them up towards the surface or something, and be on the bottom receiving end of what on the surface world we consider a hot steam geyser or jet of flame or poison gas or something of that nature as well. And again, when it comes to using that third pillar, you have yourself static effects like fog or smoke or poison gases or something, or maybe a strong wind. We have ourselves timed events. For example, maybe a wind gust or poison gas or something flows into this area once every, you roll a die every 3 rounds. You have the fear of the waterfall casting yet another bucket of water down on the PCs, or yet again some more debris falls from the ceiling in a regular pattern. And then of course you have yourselves your chaotic environments where the PCs may not know what's going to happen, and you may, as well as the adversaries, may not know. So you could have a random event, like for example, roll a d6, and if you roll a 1, you're a target of stones and bricks falling from the ceiling, and maybe those things could affect your adversaries as well. Or there could be a waterfall coming down from the ceiling, and randomly the waterfall is starting to spread and get bigger and bigger because it's draining from an underground lake above the PCs. And that rush of water could be closing off the safest areas of the room. Quite a bit difficult to do in theater of the mind, but I'm imagining like a big giant cavern, and there's the millions of tons of pressure from the water rushing down from above could be popping through small holes in the ceiling. And just imagining the PCs having to navigate away because they could, again, I like to pick with this just because I think it's kind of funny. The idea that people say, well, the shove maneuver action in the game, pushing someone down and knocking them down prone or knocking them over 5 feet is useless because, well, the enemy can just get back up in their own round. Well, that's only useless if they're not getting shoved into anything, and that's where the environment comes in. So what if there is these giant waterfalls coming from the ceiling, and you kick that blind lizard man back into the waterfall, and they get crushed by it? Or there's falling rocks from the ceiling, and you time it where you kick someone over and then run for it while they get rocks pile on top of their head. Pretty normal thing. Now, Pelora says underground is pretty hot. Haven't seen that used in general. Um, I think that's based on region because I remember when I went spelunking, it was relatively cool underground, but the temperatures underground in subterranean areas is, I'm sure, very dependent upon where you're at. And so above ground, we have things like frigid cold, and we have northern cold regions and tropical equatorial regions. We can still use those things in game down in our subterranean realms. And again, it's a great tension generator, a great pressure generator, where if the PCs need to travel down in the subterranean realm to get from A to B, they may need to do so because in a certain amount of time, because maybe this location is so hot that it causes, or they can start to accumulate levels of exhaustion through failed con rolls each day as they go through this place, and they're sweating and they're dehydrated, and there's finding a place for fresh water is very difficult. And even if they're able to bring their own supplies with them, or they have magic that can overcome or skills to overcome that, they still can't resist the overwhelming heat that's around them. And so maybe they need to go to a place where they're outside of the range of, I don't know, the 14 volcanoes that are being fueled by the lava from below them. And that's another thing too. Pelora says, I've been in a modern mine. It was hot, though that was also in South Africa. One I just Googled apparently gets up to 60 degrees Celsius, or whatever that is in grapefruit, or whatever unit Americans are using now. I think I don't know what 60 Celsius is in Fahrenheit. I'm not going to look that up right now, but yes, there are, we could, if we Google ourselves, 140. Yeah, we Google ourselves some of the real life work that miners do, that people that dig underground. We've seen in the world, we've seen modern day mine shafts collapse on people. There was a cave that trapped students. There was I don't remember what country that is. I remember there were miners that were trapped in Chile. That happened here in the United States, in the mountains of Virginia or West Virginia. I mean, that happens a lot. And this is with modern day technology and warning systems and skilled employees and that kind of thing in a medieval setting. Not that they would have any less ability to navigate those things, but we could have ourselves an industrialized community down in the Underdark, where there are actual mines with mine carts and locations that have been completely excavated from their ore, so they're completely abandoned, or various mines in various states of exploration, whether a mine shaft's been filled with acid or water, or they found a pocket of poison gases, or some forms of dangerous creatures have moved in and taken root. Some hive-like creatures have moved in, and the dwarves are just like, there's no point in even trying to get them out of there. And combine that with the frigid cold or super heat is pretty nasty. I'm pretty sure. Infinite Roleplay says, I think it's the first few feet it's cooler underground as cold air, denser, but like the deeper you go, the warmer it gets. That's probably it, because I didn't go. I'm sure when I went caving, and there's Perry's Cave up here in on Put-in Bay Island in. That's pretty cool, but it's probably has a lot to do with depth, like you said, depth and pressure, which is something else I guess we don't really think about, is the depth and pressure that the air in our bodies undergo. I'm not sure how much pressure it would be subterranean wise versus the pressures that are in the deep ocean, but I'm sure it has some effect. Not sure what the deepest cave is like. Anyway, Infinite Roleplay goes on to say, like the giant deep borehole in Russia where the miners started thinking they were digging the hell. Pelor says, "Go deep enough, and gravity starts going weird too." Ooh, ooh, that's an idea. If you really wanted to ramp up the bizarre, like the fantastical elements, it is possible to do a maybe a high gravity element to it, or if you wanted to do the Total Recall, the second movie, not the classic Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the one after it, the Colin Farrell version. I believe there was a world tunnel. It was an elevator that went straight through the core of the earth and came up the other side. And the idea of having going to the center of the earth and then exiting out exactly on the other side has always been a part of fiction. Maybe in your setting, there's like a strange elevator of some sort. Um, yeah, you guys are going into the different types of mines around the world. Infinite brings up the Kola super deep borehole in Murmansk, Russia. And Tesla Ranger brings up the fact that the temperature of a cave is usually close to the average annual temperature for the region where it is located. For example, caves in Texas can be as warm as 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Caves in Missouri might be between 55 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Caves in Wisconsin might be a chilly 50-degree Fahrenheit. Yeah, and again, we bring up the fact that what happens, I guess is a weird way to say it. What happens underground may not just stay underground. The two regions may have a lot to do with each other, which might be a reason why you have yourselves your frost giants that live in caves in frosty areas or upper reaches of mountains, whereas you may have your fire giants also living in caves, but they live in um, different areas. Underground is the new Vegas. um, yeah, I mean, we know that there are abilities to draw power from geothermal events as well, heating homes, or rather regulating the heat and cooling of homes by using geothermal ventilation and energies. So that's also a possibility as well. And maybe surface dwellers are drawing upon that. And so uh, Tesla Ranger says, quote, "You feared to go into these mines. The dwarves delved too greedily and too deep. You know what they awoke in the darkness of Khazad-dûm, shadow and flame." Uh, it's I love the idea of uncovering, because that's another thing that we might want to ramp up in our subterranean realms, the idea of going down deep into this world and uncovering things that should be left alone. The the it's the I mean, that's a classic trope that is so classic that we use it all the time, that there are things best left unknown, which is exactly where um, the whole Cthulhu mythos delves into, where we engage in science or history or engage in things that we don't know much about, but our own hubris, our own arrogance, and our own pride makes us uncover things that we shouldn't. And so, yeah, cosmic horror genre. Of course, there's cosmic horror, and a lot of that cosmic horror, um, strangely, comes from the outside of us, deep space. We think of Cthulhu and Yog Sothoth and all these other alien creatures from insanity coming from other ancient worlds, not even other planes of existence, but yet other worlds. But the same goes for how we also think of them coming from the deep oceans and the deep caverns down beneath us, and that maybe we shouldn't dig too deep. The idea of digging towards hell, right? It's that literally could be a truism, and there may be defenders or communities that live underground that are either defending our world from those things escaping, or different cultures. Maybe the dwarves are like, "You guys are silly. There's no hell down here. It's pure science. It's what we can see. I don't believe you." Where there could be other groups that are like, "No, really, it's you don't want to release the flame and shadow and stone that is beneath us, because it could overtake the world." Infinite says, "Oh man, there are limestone caverns under the Everglades where, when there is a major drought, the above ground lake disappears. It may be the Everglades, if I remember correctly. There are you can have um, seasonal events. For example, maybe there's like a monsoon season. So normally the caverns and the upper reaches are very dry, but during the monsoon season, the caverns below could flood by the seasonal rains that come through, the very powerful seasonal rains. And so the PCs might be in a location where the people who live below are battening down the hatches, and PCs are like, why is everybody panicked and getting their stuff together? And then all of a sudden, as deeply as they've gone, the miles deep that they've gone in these twisting and turning caverns starts to flood with water, and now you have yourselves a ton of hazards where climbing hazards and places are getting slick, and caverns are flooding with water, and maybe some of these places get closed off due to mudslides or dislodging of giant boulders and rocks and things like that. And keeping track of that might be a little bit difficult as I'm bringing all these up, but I think using them sparingly and then starting getting used to adding in these hazards, adding in these difficulties. For example, PCs are in a subterranean cavern. Subterranean cavern starts to flood with water. PCs are engaged in deep battle with their adversaries, and now both the PCs and the adversaries are looking at each other like those blind lizard people and thinking to themselves, do I keep fighting or do I climb for, get to high ground? I don't know what I should do. Now, maybe those blind albino lizard people are perfectly fine swimming in and around the deep waters that might be filling these caverns. But again, putting those hard choices in the player's hands, I think is possible. Not only, but I think it's possible using the environment as that third pillar, as that stable triangle in our games and such. But going back to the idea of shadow and flame as well, we can really start to draw on that in terms of using some or reskinning some of our, whether it's fire elementals or shadow demons or shadow dragons or things. We can personify some of those deep elements or subtract the personification from them. So if you very quickly are thinking, man, okay, there's flame spreading in the caves, but I don't really know how to do this mechanically. What you could do is strip away the sentience of, say, like a fire elemental and just make it an environmental effect that just happens to be spreading down, through the caves and cavern walls and ceilings and such. And sure, the PCs, logically speaking, it doesn't really make sense for them to be able to fight it, but it could be an environmental effect in the sense of, hey, if you move through or inside of this space, you're going to be attacked by these flames, and i.e. reskinning your fire elemental. And that's basically a trick, a very simple trick that we as DMs or GMs can use in any of our games by removing or adding in a sentience to something that normally doesn't have it or has it and loses it. So, for example, you want a vast pool of acid, you could just remove the idea that something is a gelatinous cube and just fill the pool with gelatinous cubes affect acid, but it's not alive. And sure, no PC in their right mind is going to step into it, but if they are on a narrow ledge, or maybe they're walking through an underground cave that's filled with pools of acid, and they have to move through this chaos single file without disturbing the acid or stepping into it by accident, and suddenly they're attacked by their enemies who are also on this, walking along stepping into the safer areas outside of the acid. One fumbled roll, one misstep, and your foot goes down into it. Yeah, that could be a problem. Again, using the environment, setting up some dangers in and around the PCs, and having them think outside the box in terms of navigating what's around them. Now, uh, Rickard says the caverns of the prisoner. A legend whispers that there is a giant cavern somewhere in the Underdark, emanating evil from the unknowable form trapped within. Explorers tell of lost friends who ventured out in search of the accursed place. Of course, that's a perfect hook right there. You know, something trapped down in there, and each of the PCs might have their own reasoning. Maybe one of the PCs is a dwarf and wants to free the spirit of their dwarven ancestor. Another PC might be religiously inclined and understands there's a great evil trapped down in there, and some other force is trying to release it, and their job is to make sure it stays trapped. You know, you could have all kinds of hooks. Of course, your greedy PCs. Hey, there's a vast treasure down there held in the held down deep in this place where this powerful entity is held prisoner, and they just want to steal steal the artifact that is holding it, keeping it in this world or something like that. I mean, just taking those ideas and I think even the idea of similar to swimming in the ocean as far as you can, we also have to consider that PCs probably can only travel as deep and into as subterranean realm as they can get, only so far as to go half their distance, because they still have to get back. So if you can swim 100 yards, you can technically, if you want to swim out that far, if you don't have a place to rest, really your distance is halved because you still have to get back to shore, right? So the PCs may be under a time pressure or resource pressure to delve down in the Underdark to a realm to find something, only to have to get that and scramble their way back out, which in effect may be the other. That's the part we don't often talk about, is the hey, we're going into the ancient temple to find our thing. But normally we really don't role play out the exit strategy. Of course, the exit strategy being, well, we've killed everything on our way into the dungeon and we know all the traps, so we're just going to sneak our way back out. But in a vast, if we consider our subterranean realm to be inhabited by different cultures and societies, they could fill the voids that the PCs create on their way slaughtering everything. And then once they're on their way out, there may be something bigger and better moving in the way. Rickard says, "What are you talking about? It be only fumes. Them surface folk don't know you can't breathe them fumes." You see, I like the idea. I really like the idea that the information that the PCs gather could be slightly incorrect as well, or maybe they hire a guide that isn't quite the guide isn't quite as knowledgeable as everyone would think. So there is a possibility that the PCs are like, oh, we got ourselves a map, and we know where the drow megalopolis is, and we're going to avoid that, and we know where the deep gnomes live, and we're going to avoid that, and right here is the ancient, we're going to avoid all the dangers and find out where we need to go. And come to find out that the safest path to get there has been a complete lie. It's just filled with boiling lava and poison gases and collapsing roofs and pit traps and all kinds of hazards and hives and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, dude, as a guide, you just suck, man. Oh, wow. But yeah, there's so many things I think for me as a self-appointed third pillarist, that we have rules that are available to us. I think it's just that those things are kind of underdeveloped and underutilized and kind of spread throughout the rules that we use in our games, whether it is Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or Fate or whatever, what have you, that we can still pull on those elements and use them in our games. Like, for example, you could reskin, let's say, a steam breathing dragon turtle as a massive burrowing machine that digs down deep into the Underdark and whatnot, that spews out hot steam as a byproduct of how the engine is fed by some gnomish creators. Or you could have a region where you want to include some kobolds, and you're like, man, I need some good traps for some kobolds. And you could establish a place where they are experts at corralling certain types of creatures or things to use to trap their enemies. For example, maybe they they poke and prod the hive of some underground wasps or something that goes after the PCs, or they poke and prod. There's a creature called a piercer, which looks like a stalactite that drops down on top of the PCs and pierces them. And there's also things known as ropers, which are the opposite. They're like the stalagmites on the bottom, and they have like ropes that peer, and they have like a big eye, I think, in the center of their head, in the mouth or something like that. So those, maybe there's like a gang of kobolds that uses them to trap the players in there. And again, using reskinning things like a grease spell or an entangle spell or a web spell or sleep spell or something, and just reskinning them as traps, whether it's poison gases or adhesive fluid that's dropped on top of them or something like that. Oh man. Infinite Roleplay says the piercer is, if I remember, the juvenile roper. I'm a nerd. I don't remember their ecology, and I'm pretty sure they were kind of Gygaxian a little bit. Although I for some reason I remember a scientific cutaway of a piercer in some kind of publication, and I don't know what's going on. Polaris like, damn nerds. Yeah. I hear you, man. You got to do the old man voice with the fist in the air. Damn nerds, take your dice off my lawn. and anyway, yeah, we're getting close to our hour mark. But again, I know today is not Thursday, but in honor of the fact that we did skip a day for the holiday, today is third Pillar Thursday. Tomorrow will be Future Friday, where we get to talk about digging into like asteroids or alien worlds or moons and subterranean exploration when it comes to science and science fiction from our modern day. Like we talked about our own modern day miners, mining shafts and things like that. The people that explore that, which is a harsh. I would never want to be a miner if given a choice, but it's a way of life for some people, multi-generational, as a matter of fact. When I worked for the Treasury Department, I paid out black lung payments to people who were suffering from black lung in mines and whatnot. But then again, using man, we didn't even talk about mine. Let's. I want to read this comment, then end this off with mine shafts and stuff in our medieval worlds as well. So Rickard says, okay, people, everyone back in the time machine, back to Friday we go. Oh, thank you all for participating in a practical episode of Future Friday. Yeah. He's like, you can't even drink if you're a miner. You're so wrong. I hear you. Boom. So okay, so we do. I talked a lot about natural caverns, right? Filling with water and underground lakes and waterfalls and lava and geysers and acid and things like that. But we really haven't talked about too much about mine shafts. And now, having a mine shaft cart race, I'm not sure exactly how you would do that. Although in my head, I do kind of have a possibility. But when it comes to mine shafts, we get to include like elevators or cable cars. We get to include mine carts, those steel mine carts filled or maybe not filled with ore that can or cannot lose their brakes as they slide up and down these the railings and such. Um, I'm sure there's plenty of fun and amazing video in various movies and things like that. Maybe you might be able to Google through it or get on YouTube and find some like minecart racing, minecart chases or whatnot. I believe a minecart was used in one of the Indiana Jones movies. Um, but also we have ourselves like machines, digging machines, maybe. We can add ourselves a foundry or factories as well. Foundries, factories, forges in our deep minds, as well as um, purposefully created surfaces, meaning like um, circular or rectangular or squared dug out. Our classic dugout dungeons where they're flat surfaces, but also we have ourselves vertical shafts, which may or may not have ladders that extend up and below them. There may even be going to the classic movie of in Lord of the Rings, there were the mines of Moria, and Saruman was having the Orokai exposed out of the rock and the muck and such, and having like the membranes pulled off of their bodies, and we saw there a ton of like scaffoldings and rope bridges and catwalks and cranes lifting up heavy materials. And I think that very much is the environment as well. The environment doesn't necessarily need to be natural. It just needs to be a unique location. So PCs, the archer climbing up to the highest peak, dangling off the edge of a crane, or the more melee characters of pulling their swords and fighting on the catwalks and kicking their enemies off the catwalks, or someone setting fire to a rope bridge as enemies try to go after them, or maybe the PCs are on a rope bridge and someone tries to cut the ropes or something, like scaling a scaffolding and fighting off enemies as they try to climb up above or throw materials down below them, hiding in using stacked blocks that are cut from, limestone blocks cut from the walls and such, and using that as cover or using it as high ground or something, as well as flaming pits or braziers that are around, or a forge may have iron ore that's molten being moved or carried or pouring into molds or something, or a factory that's taking the ore and moving down an assembly line, or a conveyor belt dumping into into deep flames, and the PCs being captured or fighting on top of the conveyor belts and stuff. Like all of those kind of things are, to me, are very cinematic, i.e. cinematic environments, very cinematic adventures. And I think it should, we shouldn't ignore that. I think we should embrace those things. Whether, hey, if you stand on top of the conveyor belt, you're going to move so many squares or feet or something, or yards or meters or something each round that you stand on top of it, or the gears are moving and you have to make a strength check to get your arm out of the gear. Otherwise it'll start to, in 3 rounds your arm will be crushed or something like that. Undo says the lizard guy said we can make it, but then in the middle of the cave he remembers that we can't breathe underwater. Yeah. I think the dumb trolls might get away with doing that. They're like, you told us we could swim. I forgot that we couldn't. You lied to me. It was like, wow. Oh, infinite role places. I started drinking when I was 8. I don't know if that's a good thing. All right, guys. Anyway, thank you very much. I notice very many of you are a number of you are using the audio from the Discord. I hope that's better for you. I hope my audio is coming through with less hesitation, less buffer. So good on you guys. There will be a time when, of course, as I learn more about how to do things, because I'm old and crotchety. So In the future, I will be learning a lot more about Fantasy Grounds, and of course, taking myself some classes from Fantasy Grounds College, which is kind of why we've kind of partnered up a little bit. So uh, there will be a time when there is a chance to there will be a chance where I will be uh, as I learn, I will be expressing some of those things for you guys. So basically, like how we do here, we do Monster Monday, Tips and Tricks Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar Thursdays. Applying those concepts to how to use Fantasy Grounds and using that and expressing that in Fantasy Grounds College. So yes, that makes sense that it will be coming soon. When I can't tell you because yeah, I got to learn myself, but that will be a possibility. Also, guys, if you, for those who find this important, um, my Patreon page is open now. So the information below each of the video as I go live, generally demi-daily Monday through Friday, barring sleep and or holidays. Um, there's new information listed below that. For example, the information is in terms of joining the classes and the for Fantasy Grounds College, including the Discord and their website, as well as uh, going over to Critical Hit Publishing, joining the Facebook group, and all that information is down below. So, so that has been updated for everyone. Thank you for giving me the impetus to push it. Rickard says, "Yay for Patreon." That is not. That is not that you can't join the Discord. Yeah, it's one has nothing to do with the other. It's just if anyone feels like dropping a tip or something like that, I would appreciate it, but it's not necessary. Anyway, guys, everyone have a great weekend. If you Yes, I will be here Saturday. I know normally I don't go live on Saturdays, but because I skipped a day in the week, I thought I will do that. Guys, everyone have a great one. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for being part of, I don't know, this journey that I'm on, and helping me get there slowly and surely, and definitely not dropping what I'm doing. I love doing these live streams and just talking about things, and we'll move on from there. Not sure what we're going to talk about next week, but we'll see. Guys, everyone have a great one. I will see thee later. See ya. Bye. Mm, mm, mm. And